Welcome to the Philosophical Odysseys podcast. Look around your room right now.
Yeah, take a real look.
Look down at your hands. Feel the weight of whatever device you are using to listen to this deep dive. Maybe you're holding a phone, or, maybe wearing headphones, or sitting in your car gripping the steering wheel.
Right, feeling the texture of it against your skin.
Exactly. And listen to the very specific timbre of my voice in your ears right now. It all feels undeniably solid, doesn't it?
It feels absolute, unquestionable.
But I want to pose a question to you, and it is genuinely one of the most destabilizing, terrifying questions a human being can ask.
Oh, here we go.
How do you know any of this is actually real?
It is the ultimate epistemic trapdoor. I mean, the absolute ground zero of human inquiry.
It really is. Because today, our mission is to take a comprehensive philosophical guide, a brilliant, accessible distillation of some of the most fundamental ideas in the history of human thought. And we're going to use it to plunge headfirst into one of the most famous, yet, I'd say, widely misunderstood, three-word phrases in all of human history.
Cogito ergo sum.
Yes. I think, therefore I am.
It's a phrase so ubiquitous, it honestly borders on cliché. It's the kind of thing you see printed on tote bags or like coffee mugs at a bookstore.
Yeah, totally.
Yet the brutal, rigorous intellectual journey required to arrive at those three words, it literally shaped the modern world.
It completely rewired our fundamental understanding of reality, science, and the self.
It really did.
Which is exactly why we are not going to treat this deep dive like some dusty academic lecture.
No, absolutely not.
This is an existential detective story. We are going to use our source material to systematically strip away every single assumption you have about your life, your body, and the universe.
We are going to face down absolute paralyzing skepticism.
And by the end of our time together, we are going to try to definitively prove that you listening to this right now, actually exist.
And the stakes are quite literally everything. Because if the philosophical framework we are exploring today fails, well, we are left with nothing.
Just an absolute void.
Exactly, an absolute void. These ideas are not just clever intellectual puzzles. They form the very scaffolding of how we justify claiming to know anything at all.
Right, from the highly complex laws of quantum physics down to, like, the simple fact that you drank a cup of coffee this morning.
It all requires a foundation.
So to understand why someone would subject themselves to this kind of mental torture, we have to travel back to the 17th century and meet our lead investigator.
The French philosopher René Descartes.
Right. And the 17th century in Europe, it was an era of profound, earth-shattering upheaval.
Oh, completely. The scientific revolution was just exploding.
You had pioneers looking up at the stars through the very first telescopes, proving the Earth wasn't the center of the universe.
Right, you had people dropping weights, studying trajectory, and realizing that the old medieval ways of understanding the world,
which were largely based on blindly accepting ancient Aristotelian authority, right?
Yeah, that and strict religious dogma. They realized all of that was fundamentally structurally flawed.
The intellectual landscape was entirely collapsing beneath everyone's feet.
It really was. For centuries, European truth was essentially whatever Aristotle had written down 2 millennia prior.
Or whatever the church dictated.
Exactly. But suddenly you have this radical generation of thinkers realizing that the universe operates on observable physical laws, mathematical principles.
And Descartes wasn't merely a philosopher sitting in an armchair.
Right.
He was a brilliant mathematician.
Oh, a pioneer of the scientific revolution. He invented the Cartesian coordinate system.
Oh, right. The algebraic grid mapping system we still use to plot geometric shapes.
Yeah, an X and Y axis. That was him.
So he was a mind obsessed with pure, verifiable logic. He wasn't interested in maybe or probably.
Precisely. Because he had the mind of a mathematician, he was obsessed with precision and certainty.
Right.
He looked at the state of human knowledge in his era and saw basically a dilapidated, structurally unsound building.
A terrifying mishmash of old superstitions, untested assumptions, folklore, and, frankly, bad science.
Yeah. So Descartes' ultimate goal was to tear down this crumbling temple of human knowledge and rebuild it entirely from scratch.
But to build a new fortress of science, he needed a new foundation.
A bedrock that was absolutely unshakable, completely and utterly immune to any form of doubt.
And his tool for doing this is something the text calls the method of doubt.
Right?
And I have to be honest, reading about this method in our sources, it feels incredibly extreme.
Oh, it is. It's radical.
He didn't just want to casually sort the good ideas from the bad ideas. He decided to completely, violently discard any belief that contained even the tiniest, most microscopic speck of uncertainty.
It's a radical approach to epistemology.
Which is the study of knowledge itself, right?
Right, exactly. Descartes decided that if a belief could be doubted, even a fraction of a percent, it had to be treated as entirely false. It is a scorched earth policy for the human mind.
Our source text uses a really vivid analogy for this, and I want to dig into the mechanics of it.
The apple basket.
Yes. Imagine you have a basket of apples. These apples represent all of your beliefs, everything you think you know about the world.
Okay.
Now, you know for a fact that some of these apples are rotten, and you are terrified that the rot is going to spread and ruin the good apples.
Right, the bad ideas will corrupt the good ones.
Exactly. So how do you fix the problem? Descartes realized that if you just reach in and try to pick out the visibly rotten ones, you might miss one.
A tiny speck of rot might be hidden.
And if you miss even one, the whole basket is eventually doomed. So you don't pick through them, you dump the entire basket onto the floor.
Every single apple.
Just to be absolutely 100% sure no rot remained in the basket.
You empty the mind completely. Then, you only put an apple back into the basket if you can verify, beyond any conceivable shadow of a doubt, that it is perfectly sound.
I understand the logic, but I really need to push back on the practicality of this.
Sure.
Isn't this sheer paranoia? I mean, if I actually applied this method of doubt to my daily life, I wouldn't be able to function.
Right, it seems impossible.
How do you walk out your front door if you doubt the floor exists? How do you eat a meal if you doubt the food is real? It seems totally paralyzing.
That is a very common and completely valid reaction. But it's crucial to understand the context of what Descartes is doing here.
Okay.
He isn't walking around in his daily life bumping into walls because he doubts they exist.
Wait, he's not actually crazy.
No, not at all. This is a highly controlled theoretical exercise. He specifically set aside time in his life, sitting alone in a room by a fire, to conduct this mental experiment.
Ah.
The text is very clear on this. Philosophical skepticism doesn't mean you actually believe you know nothing.
Oh, right, because claiming I know absolutely nothing is a logical contradiction.
Exactly. If you know that you know nothing, then you know at least one thing.
Right, it's a self-defeating statement.
The skepticism here is a methodological tool. It's a stress test for reality.
The stress test. I like that.
Yeah, it's a way to aggressively challenge how we justify our claims to knowledge. Descartes is essentially saying, let's assume everything is a lie, just to see if there is any truth that is so powerful it forces me to believe it.
Okay, let's run the stress test. Let's look at the first massive batch of apples he throws out of the basket.
The things we know through our senses.
Right. Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. This is how we interact with the universe.
Yeah.
But Descartes points out almost immediately that our senses are notoriously, demonstrably unreliable.
They are a primary interface with reality, yet they betray us constantly.
The text uses a great, simple example to illustrate this. A tomato.
Ah.
You look at a ripe tomato in bright daylight, and your eyes tell you it is a vibrant, undeniable red.
Unmistakably red.
But you take that exact same tomato, put it in a dark room under a blue fluorescent light, or even just look at it in dim twilight, and it suddenly looks black or purple or a muddy gray.
So what is the true objective color of the tomato?
Exactly. Your visual cortex is giving you wildly conflicting reports based entirely on the external lighting conditions.
Or consider the classic example of a straight stick half submerged in a glass of water.
Oh, refraction.
Right. It looks completely bent or broken.
Yeah.
Your eyes unequivocally report that it is bent. But if you pull it out, you feel with your hands that it is straight.
Right, the senses contradict each other.
If you trust your visual senses implicitly, you would be forced to believe that the water possesses some magical property that physically fractures wood only to instantly heal it when removed.
Which is absurd. Or, think about modern neuroscience. We know now that our brains are literally trapped in the pitch-black vault of our skulls. Our brains have never actually seen light or heard sound. They just receive electrical signals from our sensory organs and then hallucinate a cohesive model of reality based on those signals.
A very compelling hallucination, but a hallucination nonetheless.
Right. When you see a mirage of water on a hot highway, your brain is literally painting a 3D puddle into your visual field that does not physically exist.
Yeah.
So Descartes says, look, if my senses have deceived me even once, it is absolute foolishness to trust them completely ever again.
Out go the sensory apples.
And with that one single move, the implications are staggering. He has discarded almost the entirety of empirical human knowledge.
All of physics, astronomy, biology, geography, history.
Anything that relies on observing the physical world or reading a book with your physical eyes is suddenly deemed inherently untrustworthy.
It wipes out 99% of our reality.
It does. But honestly, I can accept that my eyes might misjudge a color or a distance, but I still feel confident that I'm sitting here in this chair.
You feel grounded.
Yeah, I can feel the weight of my own body. I know I am awake. My senses might be a little fuzzy around the edges, but the core experience of reality is solid.
Well, that is exactly the defense Descartes anticipates. And that brings us to the next, much more devastating level of his demolition.
Oh,
The dream argument.
right. This is where the floor really drops out. I have had dreams, and I think everyone listening has had dreams that were so incredibly vivid, so deeply immersive, that while I was inside them, I had absolutely zero doubt that they were real.
Absolutely.
I have felt the physical texture of objects in dreams. I have felt genuine, heart-pounding terror. I've even had those awful false awakenings,
Oh, where you dream that you woke up.
Yes, I start getting dressed, make coffee, only to realize I was still asleep and wake up again in the real world.
The epistemic problem that dreams pose is absolutely fascinating.
It's terrifying.
In a dream state, your brain is fully simulating a complex three-dimensional environment. It is generating the sights, the sounds, the social interactions, and even the physics of that dream world.
Right.
And when you are inside the simulation, you accept its rules implicitly. You might find yourself breathing underwater, and your dream self simply rationalizes, yes, this is just how the world works now.
I've had dreams where I could fly just by jumping hard enough, and my brain completely accepted it as normal physics.
Right. So Descartes points to this exact phenomenon and asks a devastating question.
Is there any specific test, any absolute foolproof marker that can definitively prove to you in this exact microscopic moment that you are not dreaming right now?
And people immediately try to find loopholes. They say, well, I can pinch myself.
But the mind is perfectly capable of simulating the sensation of pain in a dream.
Exactly. You might argue the real world is far more consistent and logical than a dream.
But, as I pointed out with false awakenings, dreams can be flawlessly coherent right up until the moment you wake up.
There is no definitive internal test you can perform to prove you are awake.
Because any test you perform could just be part of the dream.
Yes.
So, according to the brutal rules of the method of doubt, because you could technically be dreaming right now, you are forced to discard the belief that you are currently awake in a physical world.
The entire physical universe around you, your own body, the room you are in, the earth itself must be swept off the table.
It's all potentially a hallucination.
You have now lost the physical universe. But Descartes realizes he still has a few apples left in his basket.
Wait, what's left if the physical universe is gone?
He still has concepts that do not depend on the physical world existing. He still has the pure, abstract truths of mathematics and geometry.
Oh, that makes sense, because even in a totally bizarre dream, a square still has four sides.
Exact.
2 plus 2 still equals 4, whether I am awake, asleep, or hallucinating. The internal logic of mathematics holds true regardless of the physical environment.
Right. These are what philosophers call a priori truths. They are known independent of physical experience. They seem entirely immune to the dream argument because they don't rely on physical observation.
So, he's safe. He has found his unshakable foundation. He can build his new science on pure math.
Not quite. Descartes is relentless. He takes this doubt to an absolute, terrifying extreme. He is going to subject even the fundamental truths of logic and mathematics to the method of doubt.
How does he even do that?
To achieve this, he introduces perhaps the most famous and chilling thought experiment in philosophical history in his 1641 work, Meditations on First Philosophy.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that, because this is where the philosophy turns into genuine psychological horror.
It really does.
We are talking about the Melangini, the evil demon.
The evil demon. This thought experiment transcends simple sensory skepticism and attacks the very core of human cognition.
Let's clearly define what we're dealing with here. Descartes asks us to imagine a being of immense, omnipotent, godlike power.
Right.
But unlike God, who is traditionally understood as supremely good and truthful, this being is supremely malicious.
It is a cunning, endlessly deceptive demon whose sole, entire purpose for existing across eternity is to deceive René Descartes.
And because this demon possesses omnipotence, it has the power to manipulate the very fabric of Descartes' mind at the deepest possible level.
Yes. Descartes writes, I will suppose that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are nothing better than the illusions of dreams, by means of which this being has laid snares for my credulity.
So the demon is projecting a flawless 3D illusion directly into his consciousness.
Exactly. But the true horror is that the demon goes much further than just faking a landscape. The demon can manipulate logic itself.
This is the crucial, devastating leap.
The demon could easily be manipulating your mind so that every single time you count the sides of a square, you come up with 4. But in ultimate objective reality, a reality hidden from you squares actually have 5 sides.
Wow.
Every time you try to add 2 plus 2, the demon rewires your neurons in real time to make you feel an absolute crystal clear certainty that the answer is 4, when really it is something else entirely.
I need to stop you there, because that is terrifying. The demon is intercepting your reasoning process before you even reach a conclusion.
It's a complete hijacking.
It's not just tricking your eyes with a mirage, it's hacking the operating system of your intellect. The seemingly obvious fundamental truths of mathematics and geometry might just be a rigged game designed to keep you trapped in a false paradigm.
And if such a demon is even logically possible, and because we cannot definitively prove that an omnipotent deceiver is impossible, then we are trapped.
According to the strict rules of the method of doubt, we must discard mathematics, geometry, and basic logic.
The last remaining apples are dumped onto the floor. The basket is completely, utterly empty.
I feel a genuine sense of vertigo just thinking about it. But our sources do something brilliant here. They bring this 17th century horror story right into the modern era.
Because a modern listener might say, I'm a rational 21st century materialist.
Right. I don't believe in demons, so this thought experiment doesn't apply to me.
Well, philosophy has a modern update for you, courtesy of the American philosopher Hilary Putnam in 1981.
He gave us the sci-fi equivalent of the evil demon, the brain in a vat scenario.
It is the exact same epistemic vulnerability, just dressed in the clothing of modern neuroscience and advanced computer science.
Let me paint this picture because it is incredibly evocative. Imagine that while you were sleeping last night, a team of nefarious, brilliantly evil scientists broke into your home.
Okay.
They surgically removed your brain from your skull. They carefully carried it back to their laboratory and placed it in a vat of nutrient-rich fluid to keep the biological tissue alive.
A literal brain in a jar.
Then they took millions of microscopic electrodes and hooked them up to every single nerve ending in your brain. Your optic nerves, your auditory nerves, your motor cortex, your spinal column.
And all of these electrodes are wired into a supercomputer of unimaginable futuristic processing power.
Right. And this supercomputer is running an impossibly complex, perfectly rendered simulation of reality.
A total simulation.
When this simulation wants you to perceive a blue sky, it sends the exact electrical impulses down your optic nerve that your real eyes would have sent if you were actually standing outside looking at a real sky.
Right.
When you think you're raising your hand to take a sip of coffee, your motor cortex fires off a neural command. The computer intercepts that command instantly, calculates exactly how your simulated arm should move, and feeds back the precise sensory data, the weight of the mug, the heat of the coffee, the movement of the muscles.
Subjectively, you are experiencing sitting in a chair, listening to a deep dive, breathing air, living your life. But objectively, in base reality, you are a disembodied, blind, deaf lump of gray matter floating in a jar of pink fluid on a sterile laboratory bench.
It's essentially the exact plot of The Matrix, but articulated by philosophers years before the movie came out.
Oh, absolutely.
And here is the truly inescapable kicker. From the inside, from the subjective perspective of the brain, the simulation is completely flawless. Every time you try to test reality, if you try to pinch yourself, or run a science experiment, or look through a telescope, the supercomputer simply calculates the physics of that test and feeds you the expected result. How could you ever possibly know you were in the vat?
Interestingly, Hilary Putnam actually attempted to defeat his own scenario.
Really?
The text outlines his incredibly complex attempt to use what philosophers call semantic externalism or causal theories of meaning to prove that the brain in a vat scenario is logically self-contradictory.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of Putnam's defense, because on the surface, it feels like a linguistic parlor trick. How exactly does he try to use language to save us from the vat?
Putnam argued that words do not have intrinsic meaning. They only have meaning because they have a direct, causal, historical connection to the things they refer to in the real world.
Okay, that tracks.
To use his famous example, if you want to use the word water meaningfully, you must have had some causal interaction with actual H2O. Now, let's apply this to a brain that has been in a vat its entire existence. Its word water doesn't refer to real physical H2O because it has never interacted with H2O.
Its word water actually refers to the computer code, the digital simulation of water.
Okay, I am following the logic so far. The words are mapped to the simulation, not base reality.
Therefore, Putnam argues, if a brain in a vat were to say or think the sentence, "I am a brain in a vat," it wouldn't be referring to a real biological brain and a real physical vat.
It would be referring to simulated brains and simulated vats because those are the only concepts it has ever interacted with.
Right.
So when the actual brain in a vat says, I am a brain in a vat, the statement is technically false because it is saying I am a simulated brain in a simulated vat, when in fact it is a real brain in a real vat.
It's a semantic paradox.
He claims this proves we cannot be brains in vats, because if we were, we couldn't even meaningfully express the true thought.
I absolutely have to challenge this. I understand the brilliant linguistic gymnastics Putnam is doing here, but I react to this defense with sheer existential frustration.
As many do.
As our source text notes, this is merely a semantic victory. It's a technicality of language. Sure, maybe my words are referring to computer code instead of physical atoms, but whether it's an omnipotent demon tricking my immaterial soul or a mad scientist feeding code into my disembodied brain, the fundamental horror remains exactly the same.
You are still trapped.
I am totally, terrifyingly isolated from the true nature of reality. The universe I'm experiencing is a fabricated lie. So what if I can't linguistically frame the lie with perfect referential accuracy? The lie is still happening. How does this semantic trick help me sleep at night?
Your frustration is entirely justified, and frankly, the philosophical community largely agrees with you. What is fascinating about Putnam's argument is that it solves a puzzle of language, but it utterly fails to solve the epistemic nightmare. Whether you use Putnam's semantic loophole or not, the core function of these thought experiments, the demon in the vat, remains devastatingly effective.
They act as a universal asset. They eat through absolutely everything.
They strip away the physical world, your body is gone, your memories of your childhood might be implanted code, your very logic and reasoning might be corrupted.
You've dumped every single apple, and you are staring at a terrifyingly empty floor.
We have hit absolute rock bottom. The demolition is entirely complete. We are suspended in a void of infinite, inescapable doubt. There is no up, no down, no math, no self.
And that profound state of vertigo is exactly where Descartes needed us to be.
Because it is only when you have stripped away literally everything that can possibly be doubted that you can finally see what, if anything, remains. What is the one solitary thing that is immune to the universal acid?
And this brings us to the most famous moment in the text, the indestructible pixel of truth. Cogito, ergo sum.
In the midst of this seemingly bottomless, suffocating ocean of uncertainty, Descartes' foot finally hits solid bedrock.
He realizes something incredibly profound about the nature of the deception itself. He says, okay, let's assume the absolute worst-case scenario. The evil demon exists.
Right.
The demon is deceiving me about the sky, the earth, my physical body, my memories, and even the laws of mathematics. The demon is deceiving me at every single possible turn. But in order for the demon to deceive me, there must be a me that is being deceived.
Exactly. Deception requires a target. There must be a subject experiencing the deception.
You cannot trick a non-entity. You can't deceive nothingness. If I am being tricked, if I am actively doubting my own existence, the very act of doubting is an act of thinking.
And the act of thinking absolutely requires a thinker to execute it.
I think, therefore I am.
In the original French of his 1637 work, Discourse on the Method, he wrote, Je pense, donc je suis. Later, in his 1644 Latin work, Principles of Philosophy, it was immortalized as Cogito ergo sum.
It is such a brilliant, elegant trap he sets for the demon. It's like formatting a computer's hard drive entirely.
Oh, that's a great way to think of it.
You wipe the whole system, the operating system is gone, the personal files are gone, the photos are gone. Everything is erased into absolute digital nothingness. But you find one undeletable, indestructible pixel glowing right in the center of the black screen.
Because that pixel represents the very awareness that is noticing the formatting process.
Yeah, exactly. No matter how many times the demon runs the formatting software, that one pixel remains.
That is a remarkably apt analogy for what Descartes achieved, and it is crucial to look closely at the specific mechanics of this realization, specifically his deliberate use of grammar.
Right.
Descartes did not say, I thought, therefore I was, nor did he say, I possess the capacity for thought, therefore I exist continuously.
Right. The text heavily emphasizes the grammatical present tense.
It must be an active, current, instantaneous realization. While the specific thought is occurring, in that exact microscopic moment of active consciousness, the thinker must necessarily exist.
The demon cannot make you think you exist when you don't, because the illusion of existence is existence.
The moment you declare or conceive the thought, I am, I exist, it is necessarily true for as long as you are thinking it.
Now, I do want to take a moment to give credit where credit is due, because our source text offers a fascinating piece of historical context that often gets buried.
Yeah, Descartes gets all the glory, the historical recognition, and the t-shirts. But he wasn't actually the first human being to figure this out.
No, the core concept significantly predates the 17th century.
Yeah, back in the early 5th century, over 1,000 years before Descartes was even born, St. Augustine wrote essentially the exact same logical proof.
Augustine said that we can doubt everything in the visible world, but we cannot possibly doubt the fact that we are actively doubting. If I am mistaken, I exist. Si fa lorem.
It is entirely true that Augustine anticipated the logical structure of the Cogito. However, the monumental difference lies in how Descartes weaponized it.
How so?
Augustine used it as an interesting, somewhat isolated theological point within a larger religious framework. Descartes, on the other hand, used it as the foundational, load-bearing cornerstone for an entirely new, systematic structure of secular scientific knowledge.
He used it as the fulcrum to try and move the entire universe.
Precisely.
Okay, I am taking a breath and marveling at this realization. We defeated the evil demon. We found the solid bedrock. We definitively proved that we exist.
We did.
But I have to stop and ask, what does this actually get us? We proved we exist, but we still don't have our physical bodies back. We don't have our senses, our memories, or the physical universe. Do I get my dog back? Do I get my morning cup of coffee back?
This is the critical, often overlooked pivot in Descartes' philosophy. You have to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. Descartes proved existence, yes, but what exact kind of existence did he prove?
Right.
What is the actual nature of this that has survived the acid? This brings us to the severe, almost claustrophobic limitations of the Cogito, and honestly, the incredibly bittersweet nature of this philosophical victory.
This takes us into the critique of the I, and what philosophers later call the ghost in the machine.
Critics of Descartes strongly argue that he drew entirely too much assumed meaning from his single, indestructible pixel.
Meaning he overstepped.
He successfully proved that a thinking act is currently occurring. He proved that right now, in this millisecond, there is a thought happening. But to assume that this fleeting thought belongs to a fully formed thinker with a continuous, unified historical identity, that is a massive, incredibly vulnerable philosophical leap.
Wait, let me make sure I understand. Are you saying he proved the thought exists, but maybe not the self as a person?
Precisely. The 18th century philosopher Georg Lichtenberg famously launched a devastating critique on this exact point. He argued that Descartes was grammatically and philosophically unjustified in saying, I think.
What should he have said?
Lichtenberg said he should have simply said, there is thinking going on, in the exact same way we say, it is raining.
Oh, wow.
When we look outside and say it is raining, we don't believe there is a mystical, invisible entity called it that is actively performing the raining. Raining is just a meteorological process that is happening.
Lichtenberg argued that thinking is just a cognitive process that is happening, and Descartes illegitimately smuggled an I, a person, a persistent soul, into the equation without proving it.
That is absolutely mind-bending. There is thinking going on. It completely dissolves the ego.
But even if we grant Descartes his I and assume there is a self, the text heavily emphasizes that this I is severely, almost tragically limited.
Think about what we had to violently strip away to find it.
We stripped away the biological body. We stripped away the sensory organs. So the I that remains is a mere dimensionless mathematical point of self-consciousness.
It is completely stripped of history. The demon could have easily implanted all your memories of your childhood 5 minutes ago, so you have no verifiable past.
You have no personality.
Yeah.
You have no physical form. You are just a glowing point of raw awareness floating in an infinite black void.
Furthermore, and this is where it gets incredibly lonely, the Cogito is strictly first person only. My Cogito only works for my mind. I know I exist because I am experiencing my own thoughts.
But I absolutely cannot use my cogito to prove that you exist.
Right, because I am experiencing my thoughts, not yours.
Hmm.
For all I know, you are just a very sophisticated audio hallucination generated by the evil demon to keep me entertained in my void.
The demon could be tricking me into thinking you possess a conscious mind.
This leads directly to the terrifying philosophical black hole of solipsism, the idea that your mind is the only mind that actually exists in the entire universe and everything and everyone else is merely a complex projection.
And it also establishes the infamous problem of other minds. How can we ever logically, scientifically prove that anyone else actually has a rich inner conscious life when we are forever locked out of directly verifying anything but our own?
Descartes has essentially locked himself inside a brilliantly engineered, indestructible safe room of his own consciousness, but he realizes he lost the key to get out.
But here is the fascinating part. Instead of seeing this detachment as a trap, Descartes leans into it entirely. He fully embraces this total separation between the mind and the body.
And this is where we get the deeply influential concept of Cartesian dualism.
Descartes decides that because he was able to definitively prove his mind exists without needing to prove his body exists, the mind and the body must be two fundamentally entirely different substances.
He establishes a strict, impenetrable border between them. He places the mind on a completely different ontological pedestal than the physical world.
He categorizes the mind as a res cogitans, a thinking substance. It's purely immaterial. It doesn't take up any physical space.
It doesn't have mass, weight, or dimensions. It is pure, unadulterated thought.
And the body, along with the rest of the physical universe, is res extensa, extended substance. It takes up physical space, it has mass, and it operates entirely mechanically, like a complex clockwork machine.
They are two entirely separate, incompatible realms of reality.
And this dualistic model has deeply, profoundly influenced how we intuitively picture consciousness even today. The text refers to a famous critique of this intuition called the Cartesian theater.
I love this concept because intuitively this is exactly how it feels to be a human being, right?
It feels like my biological body is just a meat robot, and the real me, my consciousness, my soul, is sitting in a little dark control room somewhere behind my eyes.
I'm sitting in a dark theater watching a movie screen. My physical eyes are just cameras feeding visual data to the screen. My ears are just microphones feeding audio to the speakers. And I am the immaterial, ghostly observer watching the show and occasionally pulling levers to make the meat robot walk or talk.
It feels highly intuitive, which is exactly why dualism has been so culturally persistent for centuries.
But philosophically and scientifically, it creates a massive, perhaps entirely insurmountable problem. In 1949, the philosopher Gilbert Ryle delivered a devastating, definitive critique of this model.
He mocked Cartesian dualism by calling it the dogma of the ghost in the machine.
The ghost in the machine. It's such an evocative, haunting phrase. Ryle was pointing out the glaring, fatal flaw in Descartes' entire setup.
The interaction problem.
Yes. If the mind is completely immaterial, a literal ghost, and the body is completely physical, a biological machine, how on earth do they manage to interact?
Exactly. Let's look at the physics of it. Physical things interact through physical forces. A billiard ball hits another billiard ball, physically transferring kinetic energy, which causes the second ball to move.
But a thought has absolutely no mass, it has no kinetic energy, it has no physical extension.
How can a totally non-physical thought like, I want to raise my right arm, cross the dimensional boundary, interface with the malware, and cause physical, biological neurons to fire, muscles to contract, and a heavy physical arm to move against gravity?
It's exactly like imagining a transparent ghost trying to push a heavy wooden grand piano across a room. The ghost has no mass, so its hands would just pass right through the wood.
There's no physical traction. Our source text notes that even Descartes himself realized this was a massive, embarrassing headache for his theory.
He desperately tried to suggest that the interaction between the ghost and the machine happened in the pineal gland, a tiny structure in the center of the brain.
But that completely fails to solve the how. Just pinpointing a location doesn't explain how zero mass moves mass.
He ultimately realized he might need constant, active, divine intervention, God literally acting as a cosmic, real-time translator just to explain how a human intention results in a human action.
Which feels like an enormous philosophical cop-out.
It is widely considered the weakest, most vulnerable link in his entire system. Ryle argued that viewing the mind as a completely separate substance is what he called a category mistake.
He used a brilliant analogy for that.
He did. It's like taking a visitor on a comprehensive tour of a university. You show them the massive library, the state-of-the-art laboratories, the student dormitories, the administrative buildings, and you introduce them to the professors.
Okay.
And at the end of the tour, the visitor says, yes, I saw all those buildings, but where's the university?
Ah, I see. The visitor makes the mistake of thinking the university is another separate building, rather than the collective organizational functioning of all the parts.
Exactly. Ryle suggests the mind isn't a separate, ghostly thing residing inside the body. It is simply a word we use to describe the complex behavioral functioning of the biological body.
Which brings us crashing right back into biology. The text uses a fantastic modern thought experiment to challenge this strict separation of identity and body.
The brain transplant.
Let's say medical science advances 100 years, and we can seamlessly perform a full brain transplant. We take my physical, biological brain out of my skull, and we successfully transplant it into your physical body. The ultimate question is, do I get a new body, or do you get a new brain?
Let's trace the logic. What does your modern intuition say about that scenario?
My intuition absolutely screams that the identity follows the physical brain. The person waking up in that hospital bed will have my memories, my personality, my specific quirks, my irrational fear of spiders. They will look down, see your hands, look in the mirror, see your face, and scream, "Ah, what happened to my body?"
This thought experiment grounds the I heavily, undeniably, back into the biological wetware. It severely damages Descartes' idea of a pure, immaterial, detached mind.
If altering or moving the physical brain completely alters or moves the mind, they cannot possibly be entirely separate, independent substances.
And this unresolved tension is the lasting legacy of Cartesian dualism. Descartes' desperate attempt to define the I as a pure, isolated, immaterial point creates centuries of endless philosophical headaches regarding personal identity, modern neuroscience, the physics of consciousness, and those other minds we are forever separated from.
So let's take stock of where Descartes is at this point in his journey. He is completely stuck in his own head. He is a disembodied ghost haunting a biological machine, and he can't even coherently explain how he controls it.
He desperately needs a way out of the void. He needs to reconstruct the physical universe and get his apples back.
Having hit rock bottom, found the indestructible pixel of the Cogito, and rigidly defined the mind, Descartes now faces the monumental task of climbing back up out of the pit of absolute skepticism. How does he safely retrieve the physical world from the floor?
He realizes he needs a rule, a standard for truth. He looks closely at his Cogito, I think, therefore I am, and he asks himself, why am I so absolutely unshakably certain of this specific thought?
He analyzes the feeling of the thought and decides it's because he perceives it clearly and distinctly. There is no fuzziness. There's no ambiguity. It is radically self-evident.
From this single observation, he derives a universal general rule for his new epistemology. Whatever I clearly and distinctly perceive to be true must be true.
It is a purely internal epistemic standard. If any other idea has that exact same crystal clear, unmistakable, undeniable ring of truth to it that the Cogito possesses, it must be accepted as absolute truth.
But wait, I have to throw a massive flag on the play here.
Go for it.
How on earth does he know the evil demon isn't actively tricking him about what feels clear and distinct? Couldn't an omnipotent demon simply manipulate his brain chemistry to make a total lie feel crystal clear and distinct?
Descartes is a genius. He must have realized this massive vulnerability. He needs a guarantor. He needs an ultimate cosmic underwriter to validate his internal feelings of clarity. And his ultimate desperate linchpin is God.
Yes. To escape the prison of his own mind, Descartes essentially argues his way back to the divine. He needs a perfect being to vouch for his cognitive faculties.
Let's walk through his logic here because it is intricate. It is often referred to as the trademark argument. Descartes looks deep inside his own isolated mind and takes an inventory of his concepts. He finds that he possesses a very specific idea, the idea of a perfect, infinite, all-knowing, all-powerful God.
Okay.
Now, Descartes looks at himself and says, I am a deeply flawed, finite, severely limited being. I doubt, I make mistakes, I am imperfect. A finite, imperfect being cannot possibly generate the concepts of an infinite, perfect being entirely on its own.
The lesser cannot logically create the greater. The effect cannot contain more reality than the cause.
Therefore, he concludes, the idea of a perfect God must have been implanted in his mind by an actual existing perfect God, like a craftsman leaving a trademark on his work.
It is a fascinating variation of the ontological arguments for the existence of God. He relies heavily on medieval scholastic concepts of formal reality versus objective reality. Because the idea in his head has the objective reality of infinite perfection, it absolutely requires a cause with the formal reality of infinite perfection to have created it. Perfection must exist in reality to have caused the concept of perfection in his mind.
Right, and here is exactly how that theological move attempts to save his physical universe. Descartes reasons that if God is infinitely perfect, then God must be completely, utterly good. Deception, malice, and trickery are flaws. They are signs of weakness and imperfection.
Therefore, a perfect God would categorically not be a deceiver. God would never allow an evil demon to possess all reality and trick Descartes permanently.
Furthermore, God would not have given Descartes sensory organs and rational faculties that are fundamentally irreparably broken.
Consequently, Descartes argues, our rational minds and our physical senses, if we use them carefully, methodically, and without jumping to conclusions, can ultimately be trusted because they are gifts from a perfect, non-deceiving creator.
And just like that, with a wave of a theological wand, the evil demon is banished forever. The physical world is restored. The truths of mathematics are restored. Descartes can finally start picking the apples up off the floor and putting them back in the basket, provided he inspects them with clear and distinct logic first.
I have to say, it sounds like a very neat, almost Hollywood ending to an existential crisis, but there is a massive gaping hole in this logic.
Oh, is there ever?
It is a logical trap so famous and so devastating that it has its own title in philosophy, the Cartesian circle. And it was heavily, mercilessly criticized by later thinkers, particularly the brilliant Scottish philosopher David Hume in the 18th century.
Hume, who was an absolute master of skepticism himself, saw right through the structural weakness of Descartes' grand escape attempt. He pointed out that Descartes committed a textbook logical fallacy.
Let's trace the exact geometry of the circle because it's wild that a mathematician of Descartes' caliber fell for it. Let's look at the steps. Step 1. Descartes needs a rule for truth, so he says we can totally trust our clear and distinct ideas to be true.
Step 2. He uses his specific, clear, and distinct idea of a perfect God to prove that God actually exists.
Step 3. He uses the existence of this perfect, non-deceiving God to prove that we can trust our clear and distinct ideas in the first place.
The circularity is blatant once you map it out. He relies on the absolute reliability of his clear ideas to prove God, but he completely relies on God to guarantee the absolute reliability of his clear ideas.
He used the key to lock the door from the inside. You cannot use the output of a system to validate the very system producing the output. That's like a known liar saying, you can trust me because I am telling you right now that I always tell the truth.
If the evil demon is capable of manipulating your core logic, the demon could simply make you think the trademark argument for God is clear, distinct, and logically sound when it's actually total garbage.
Precisely the issue. If he can be mistaken about what constitutes a genuinely clear and distinct idea, if the demon has infiltrated the very standard of evidence itself, then the entire rebuilding phase collapses like a house of cards in a hurricane.
The door he thought he opened is slammed shut. The evil demon rushes right back in, more powerful than ever.
Descartes started out trying to build an indestructible mathematical fortress of human knowledge. But through this circular logic, he accidentally built an inescapable, windowless prison of extreme skepticism, walked inside, and welded the door shut behind him. He never truly escaped the void.
The spectacular collapse of Descartes' reconstruction project caused a massive crisis in philosophy. It forced subsequent generations of philosophers to desperately scramble for alternative, non-circular ways to save empirical science and human knowledge.
Our text spends some time detailing how the English philosopher John Locke attempted a completely different route later in the 17th century. Locke didn't try to rely on a perfect divine guarantor in the same purely rationalist mathematical way Descartes did.
Instead, Locke tried to find a practical workaround to sensory doubt by dividing the properties of the physical world into two distinct categories.
Right. He introduced the concept of primary qualities versus secondary qualities. Let's break down how Locke thought this could save science from the demon.
Locke conceded a major point to Descartes' sensory doubt. Locke agreed that what he called secondary qualities are entirely subjective. They do not exist in the objects themselves. They exist only in the mind of the observer.
These are things like color, taste, sound, and smell. To return to our earlier example, the tomato isn't actually physically red.
Redness is simply how our biological visual cortex interprets specific wavelengths of light reflecting off the surface. That is exactly why the tomato looks black under blue light. The wavelength changed, so the subjective experience changed. The redness is entirely in your head.
Okay, so Locke admits that a huge chunk of our sensory experience is basically a hallucination. But what does he try to save?
He tried to save the primary qualities. Locke argued that primary qualities are entirely objective. They belong to the physical object itself inherently, regardless of whether anyone is looking at it or perceiving it.
These are the measurable mathematical properties: physical shape, physical size, mass, solidity, and motion.
So his argument is that even if my eyes are tricking me about the tomato's color, or my tongue is tricking me about its taste, the tomato still has a definitive, objective, physical, spherical shape. It still takes up a very specific, mathematically measurable amount of physical space in the universe.
Exactly. Locke's great hope was that by stripping away the subjective secondary qualities and focusing the entirety of the scientific method strictly on these primary qualities, the measurable, mathematical, physical aspects of the world, we could build a highly reliable system of empirical knowledge without needing to solve Descartes' impossible pit of absolute skepticism.
It was a pragmatic attempt to save physics and chemistry from the evil demon.
It sounds incredibly practical, and it's basically how modern science operates today. But wait, did it actually solve the philosophical problem? Our text mentions another philosopher who came along a bit later and completely tore Locke's compromise to shreds.
Yes, the Irish philosopher George Berkeley. Berkeley looked at Locke's division and pointed out a devastating inconsistency.
What was the flaw? Because Locke's system sounds pretty solid to me.
Berkeley argued that Locke didn't go far enough. Berkeley pointed out that we only ever experience the world through our minds. If you admit that color, a secondary quality, is just an idea in the mind, how do you know about shape, a primary quality?
You only know the shape of the tomato because you see the visual boundary of its color, or you feel the tactile sensation of its solidity against your skin.
But visual boundaries and tactile sensations are also just experiences happening inside your mind.
Oh, wow. So Berkeley is saying you can't separate them. If you doubt the color because it's just a mental perception, you have to doubt the physical shape because your knowledge of the shape is also just a mental perception.
Exactly. Berkeley argued that you cannot abstract primary qualities away from secondary qualities. Try to imagine a tomato with a physical shape, but absolutely no color whatsoever, not even transparent. It's impossible.
Because all qualities are perceived by the mind, Berkeley famously concluded, esse es percipi to be is to be perceived. He argued that physical matter doesn't even exist. The entire universe is composed solely of minds and their ideas. It is a radical form of subjective idealism.
Which plunges us right back into the exact same weird, non-physical void that Descartes was trapped in. Locke tried to build a bridge to the physical world, and Berkeley just dynamited the bridge. It seems like every attempt to escape the Cogito just leads to another trap.
This relentless cycle of doubt and failed reconstruction raises what is perhaps the most vital, overarching question of our entire historical analysis today. Looking back at the rubble of the 17th and 18th centuries, did René Descartes fundamentally fail?
If we judge him strictly by his own stated goals, absolutely, unequivocally yes. He set out to build an unquestionable, rock-solid foundation for all human knowledge, a system totally immune to doubt.
Instead, his system collapsed under the weight of its own circular logic, and he left us trapped in a void with an evil demon.
And yet, despite this catastrophic structural failure, Descartes is universally recognized in academia as the absolute father of modern philosophy. Why? Not because he succeeded in banishing doubt, but because he accidentally achieved something vastly more profound and world-altering.
He made extreme, rigorous doubt the central, inescapable, defining mechanism of modern thought.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. Before Descartes, the pursuit of truth was largely an exercise in aligning your thoughts with ancient authority. You read old books and agreed with them.
After Descartes, philosophy, and by direct extension the entire scientific method, became about aggressively subjecting every single claim to the most rigorous, merciless, skeptical stress testing possible.
He gave humanity the intellectual tools to aggressively question reality, even if he couldn't personally answer those questions perfectly himself.
Furthermore, he enacted a massive tectonic shift in perspective. Before Descartes, the starting point of human knowledge was always the external world. We looked to the cosmos, to nature, or to the church to tell us what was true.
Descartes violently shifted the locus of truth to the internal subjective experience of the individual, I think. The entire universe must now be proven from the perspective of the self.
That was a wildly revolutionary shift that directly paved the way for the Enlightenment, for the birth of modern psychology, and even for the way we currently conceptualize human rights and individual political autonomy.
It is an absolutely staggering legacy. for a guy who, at the end of the day, really just wanted to be mathematically certain about his graphing paper.
It truly is one of the greatest accidental triumphs in intellectual history.
Which brings us to the end of our incredibly deep journey today. Let's do a quick, sweeping recap for you, the listener, because we have covered a massive amount of conceptual and historical ground.
We started by taking the basket of everything you believe and violently dumping it onto the floor.
We threw away your physical senses, blaming them for optical illusions, bad lighting, and neurological mirages.
We threw away your physical body and the entire physical universe, acknowledging that it might all be an incredibly vivid, inescapable dream.
We faced down the terrifying, logic-twisting power of the evil demon and its modern sci-fi equivalent, the brain in a vat, accepting that our very capacity for reason might be a rigged game.
We stripped your entire existence down to a single, microscopic, dimensionless point of awareness, the mere fleeting act of doubting. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
And then we watched as Descartes struggled, used circular logic, and ultimately failed to rebuild the physical universe from that single point, leaving us to grapple with the ghost in the machine and Berkeley's idealism.
It is a dizzying, disruptive, but ultimately profoundly liberating intellectual exercise. It clears the brush of bad assumptions.
So why should you care about any of this? Why does a 17th century French mathematician's existential crisis matter to your life right now? I'll tell you exactly why. We live in an era of unprecedented, weaponized digital illusions.
We're surrounded by AI-generated deepfakes, highly immersive virtual reality environments, algorithmically curated echo chambers, and sophisticated misinformation campaigns designed specifically to manipulate what we perceive as objective truth.
It is easier than ever to feel totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information and to genuinely question what is actually real in the digital age.
The modern world is essentially a cacophony of minor evil demons, all fiercely vying for your credulity and your data.
Exactly. But the next time you feel that technological vertigo, the next time you feel overwhelmed by the unreality of the digital age, or you question your place in this bizarre world, take a deep breath and remember René Descartes.
The very fact that you are capable of experiencing that anxiety, the very fact that your mind is actively capable of questioning the reality around you is the absolute, undeniable, indestructible proof that you belong in it.
You are here. The fact that you can ask the question, is this real, definitively proves that the asker is real. Your doubt is the unforgeable signature of your existence.
It is a profound, stabilizing comfort hidden deep within the heart of absolute skepticism.
But as always on this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over on your own, a splinter in your mind. We established today that your existence is guaranteed by the Cogito. I am thinking, therefore I am.
But remember the grammar. It only works in the present tense. It only works in the exact, precise microsecond that the thought is actively occurring.
So I ask you, what happens to you in the space between your thoughts? When you are meditating and your mind is momentarily perfectly quiet? Or, even more terrifyingly, what happens tonight when you fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, completely devoid of any conscious thought whatsoever?
If you truly only exist when you are actively thinking, does the eye blink out of existence entirely in the dark hours of the night? Are you technically dead when you sleep, only to be entirely reborn as a brand new entity, simply inheriting old memories the exact moment you wake up and have your first morning thought?
A truly chilling biological implication of the present tense cogito. Think about that tonight as you drift off into the void. Don't forget to follow us and subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes and never miss a step in this odyssey of thought. Until next time, keep questioning.